Viewpoints on the talk station FM 107 AM 1240. As I've mentioned at the opening of the program, I was looking forward to today's conversation with our guest, Barbara Holt. She's the president of North Carolina Right to Life. NCRTL.org, by the way, is the website. We've chatted with her in the past about a recent event in Raleigh, but I want to chat with her today about several things. One, the issue of North Carolina's approach to abortion. And as we heard from Tammy last evening, Tammy Fitzgerald, already legislation was introduced in 2017 that basically mirrors, maybe in fact is the original legislation that has been copied in New York State, no less. Yes, two bills were introduced, a House bill and a companion Senate bill. Unfortunately, they did not make it, but that's an indication that the topic is resonating in Raleigh. So I'm looking forward to this conversation with Barbara, but also to get her opinion of the president's address last night. I'm making an assumption without even having the opportunity to ask her. But first, Barbara, good evening. Thanks for joining us here on Viewpoints.
Thank you, Lockwood, for having me. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Our pleasure, as a matter of fact. Question, did you pay any attention? Did you bother to listen to the State of the Union address last evening?
Yes, I listened.
And the president's remarks about the issue of abortion, were you satisfied with them?
Well, the president has said many things that have really pleased the pro-life community. He started during the debates when he confronted candidate Clinton on her extreme abortion stand, which has been borne out by what's happened recently as far as the stand of the entire Democrat Party. But yes, he started then and by talking about abortions in the latter part of the pregnancy, and he continued it last night. And we were so glad to hear him reiterate his stand in defense of life.
Now, my question to you on this issue, Barbara, and again, Barbara Holt of North Carolina Right to Life, the question now goes to the state-by-state issue. And we've seen this in New York, Virginia. I understand, I've not researched this, but I understand Rhode Island has similar legislation. Is this something that is going to be dealt with state by state, or do you see this becoming a federal issue? What we're seeing right now seems to be a state issue. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the pro-abortion advocates are going to be pushing at every level. They're looking for states where there are governors and lieutenant governors that are pro-abortion and state legislatures that are pro-abortion or evenly split, or where they could pick off maybe a few Republicans and perhaps pass extreme legislation like what was in Virginia. So in Virginia, they only have in each chamber, there's only a one vote difference. So they knew that it was very evenly divided there, and they had a pro-abortion governor that would surely sign the legislation if it got to his desk. And subsequently, we've seen what's happened, that Governor Northam let the cat out of the bag, as well as Delegate Tran, that this was very extreme legislation allowing abortion up and past birth.
No, we've already seen, and of course, I mentioned a few moments ago, the Senate Bill 588, and companion House Bill 563, introduced back in 2017. And I mentioned Tammy Fitzgerald's name a few minutes ago, and of course, she brought this to our attention. There's obviously a movement that already exists in North Carolina. My question to you, Barbara, is this something that is gaining in shall we say, momentum in the state?
Well, I think as they see, if they can pick off more and more members of the pro-life party, which appears to be the Republican Party because of the way they have passed legislation in North Carolina, we hardly got any legislation passed before Republicans took control in 2011, although we did get parental consent and some elimination of abortion funding. But, they're looking towards the next election when hopefully they'll have control. And so I'm sure that their folks in North Carolina are looking for them to to put forward legislation that says this is what we'll do if we get in power. And right now they know that this is not going to be brought up. They don't have the numbers, but they're looking for the day when they will have the numbers.
Well, they didn't have the numbers. Pardon me. They didn't have the numbers in 2017, yet they brought the topic up. It strikes me that this is an important piece of legislation that the public needs to be aware of. I obviously, it didn't get a lot of publicity, but we've already seen it in 2017. So, if you will, it was a matter of let's attempt this and see what kind of reaction we are going to get. That sort of thing.
Yeah, I think they put it out there, and they. It's sort of like a drip, drip, drip.
Uh-huh.
And so I think what we have to do is let our folks know that that we're only one election away from having all of the successes that we've been able to experience since 2011 go down the drain. We've had a lot of laws passed in North Carolina to provide protection for mothers and their unborn children. And all it takes is one election where the tables are turned and bills like this could find their way, through the legislature.
Okay. But here's the other question, and this is something that I'm pretty critical about, and I've mentioned this at various times this past week and even this week, and we're now into Wednesday of the week. And what disturbs me about both New York and Virginia, and more so with Virginia than New York, although the Virginia issue has now gotten to be a real mess for a variety of other reasons, is what I saw was an absence of outrage. And frankly, and the argument was, well, the mainstream media is going to ignore this, or they basically don't want to raise this issue for fear of creating a counter movement. But my question is, it doesn't require the mainstream media to create a counter movement. But I don't see or sense a counter movement in North Carolina, let alone across the country. Other than some comments that we've had here on the air in our program, I'm just not seeing it in churches. I'm not seeing it in rallies. I'm not seeing it in any aggressive nature. Is this because people are just weary, or is it a matter of the timing isn't right for outrage?
Well, I think there is outrage. I've never seen people so energized as they've been since what happened. Maybe you don't see it where you're at, but I know that state affiliates are getting calls and emails, and people will say, I'm outraged by this, and I want to be involved. I want to do more.
But wait a second. I think it's great that the affiliates are getting the calls. The problem is, are the newspapers, are the radio stations, are the TV stations, are there chambers of commerce, for example, are the economic development council, are there calls and statements in Rotary clubs and Kiwanis clubs? That's where, talking to the various affiliates, that's turning around and talking to the church choir. What about reaching out on the streets? Where is that happening?
Well, it is in Virginia. They're having a rally there. They've had several rallies. I mean, they've been bringing people out. They've had good showings. I mean, it's.
But Virginia's a lost cause. I'm talking about states like North Carolina that isn't a lost cause. At least for the moment, it's not a lost cause.
Well, it's not a lost cause in Virginia because they've defeated the bills that have been brought forward. They're rallying because they need to defeat them. Virginia is a very unique case. Virginia has elections in 2019. Their legislature is all up for re-election. And so this issue is very critical in what happens in Virginia in this very year. It's a different state than North Carolina.
But the other aspect of this is it strikes me that there should be a hue and cry of the surrounding states to step in and play a role in helping Virginians, make some decisions. I'll just use that term. Decide up or down, but make some decisions. The thing that I guess is really disturbing, and I've got callers who have mentioned this to me, we saw the results and the reaction as a result because of a Parkland shooting, for example, down in Florida, or Sandy Hook up in Connecticut and other communities. We've seen a reaction. We saw people out marching and actually engaged, calling, playing a role. I just haven't seen this with the abortion issue, and yet we're looking at what, 60 million abortions. I mean, we've got the documentation, we've got the numbers, and now we actually have states and a governor who was given credibility. He was listened to it, and no one gagged when he said, yeah, I think if the abortion fails and the child is born, the mother and the physician should talk about it and make the decision whether to keep the child or not. It was a stunning interview, and it was played on WTOP in Washington, D.C., not a small new radio station, by the way. I'm wondering, Barbara, am I incorrect in fearing that there's a sense of complacency out there?
Well, I don't know. From the speech that you heard last night from the president, and
right.
The reaction that he got in the chamber,
but
shows you that there are people that are willing to protect unborn children and have made it their agenda. We've got obviously a news media that wants to change the subject. They have moved on.
But you can make that change. You can force them not to move on by having rallies. I say you, organizations, and of course I'm making my effort here this evening as well. It just strikes me that the door has been pushed wide open by the governor of Virginia, by this governor of New York, and by the president. And, state by state, it's just, I'm wondering, pregnancy centers across the state, are they rallying? Are they doing anything publicly? Have you heard? Do you know?
Well, I don't know exactly what they might be doing. Usually, pregnancy centers are 501c3. They're not set up to be involved politically or
valid point.
Very much legislatively. Now, just not too long ago, we had the March for Life in D.C. Did you hear a lot about it on the media?
No, only here on the talk station, to be very blunt.
We can do all the rallies that we want, but we can't force the media to cover those rallies. We can't force them, but we can speak as we do and to those that we can identify as being like-minded, and we continue to work. And identify those pro-lifers and then get them activated.
Well, I will say to you that you're correct on your observation related to the pregnancy centers, 501c3. They're very sensitive. They can't really go through that door. I appreciate your time this evening, Barbara, and I want to chat with you briefly off air. I want to remind folks our guest this evening, Barbara Holt. She is the president of North Carolina Right to Life, ncrtl.org. Barbara, as we wrap it up, anything much happening? Any plans, for example, addresses to the legislature, things of this nature? Maybe a Moral Monday where we actually discuss something of morality. Good concept, by the way.
The legislature will be bringing forth some pro-life legislation. It hasn't been introduced yet by the pieces that we have in play, but I think you can look forward to some things happening in the coming weeks.
All right. Thank you very much, Barbara. Stay with me. I'll chat with you briefly off air, but I do appreciate your time this afternoon. Barbara Holt, the organization North Carolina Right to Life, NCRTL. By the way, this is a social justice organization. I just want to share with you. Yes, it is a social justice organization. They believe in justice for the unborn. Stay with us here on Viewpoints on the Talk Station.